The envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, thin and unremarkable. Tucked between a grocery flyer and a bill she had been dreading. There was no return address, only her name written in careful blue ink. For a long time, she simply stared at it on the kitchen table, her fingers resting against the wood as if it might pulse or breathe. She almost threw it away. For months now, anything unexpected had felt like a threat. Since Daniel died, the world had become a hallway of unopened doors. Behind each one could be another loss, another reminder of what she no longer had. So she learned to keep doors closed. But the handwriting, there was something about it. Not Daniel's, not exactly, but it tugged at something deep in her chest. She opened it slowly, careful not to tear the paper inside. There was only one sentence. If you want to know the truth, come to the pier at sunset on Friday. No signature. Her heart began to beat in a way it hadn't in months, fast and uneven, as if it had forgotten how to move and was now relearning. The pier, the same one where Daniel had proposed to her 10 years ago, kneeling awkwardly on the splintered boards while fishermen watched and pretended not to stare. The same one where she had scattered his ashes 6 months ago, her hands trembling as the wind carried him away. The truth. What truth? Daniel's death had been ruled an accident, a late-night drive, rain slicked roads, a guardrail that failed. She had accepted it because there was nothing else to hold on to. Grief had consumed her so completely that she never questioned the official version of events. Until now. All week she carried the letter in her coat pocket. At work, she would touch it to make sure it was still there, her thumb tracing the crease in the paper. She tried to convince herself it was a cruel joke, or a mistake, or something meant for someone else. But Friday came. The sky was streaked with orange and violet when she parked near the pier. The air smelled like salt and rusted metal. She stepped out of the car and immediately felt that old ache, the one that had settled permanently beneath her ribs. This place was sacred and broken all at once. She walked slowly along the wooden planks. The boards creaked beneath her weight. The water below shifted and whispered. A few people lingered at the far end, but as the sun dipped lower, they drifted away. And then she saw him. He stood near the railing, his back to her, tall, broad shoulders. Dark jacket. For a moment the world tilted. Daniel. Her breath caught so violently she nearly collapsed. Her vision blurred. She took a step forward, then another, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. He turned. It wasn't Daniel, but the resemblance was enough to steal the air from her lungs. The same dark hair, though shorter. The same sharp jawline. The same eyes. He studied her carefully, as if memorizing her face. Lena, he said softly. Her name on his lips felt invasive, intimate. Who are you? She whispered. He hesitated, glancing out at the water before meeting her gaze again. My name is Adrian. She waited for more. When none came, frustration cut through her shock. You sent the letter. Yes.
Why?
He swallowed. Because you deserve to know what happened to your husband. Her body went cold. I know what happened. No, he said gently. You know what they told you. Anger flared, sudden and protective. This is cruel. I wouldn't be here if it weren't important. She wanted to leave, to turn around, get back in her car, drive home, lock the door, and forget this stranger with Daniel's eyes ever existed. But something rooted her in place. Talk, she said. Adrian exhaled slowly, as if preparing for impact. Daniel didn't die by accident. The words fell between them, heavy and impossible. She shook her head immediately. Stop. He was investigating something. He was an accountant, she snapped. He hated conflict. He hated confrontation. He could barely argue with a waiter. Adrian's eyes softened. He was braver than you think. The pier seemed to shrink around them. My brother worked with him, Adrian continued. There were financial irregularities at the firm, large amounts of money being moved through shell accounts. Daniel found it. She stared at him, trying to reconcile the image of her husband balancing their checkbook at the kitchen counter with the man Adrian was describing. He told me he was going to report it, Adrian said. He thought he could fix it quietly. Her throat tightened. Daniel had been distracted. Those last few weeks, restless. She had asked him what was wrong. And he had smiled, kissed her forehead, said it was just work stress. "I tried to warn him," Adrian went on, "but he didn't listen." "You're lying," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "I wish I were." The water slapped against the pier below them. "He wasn't supposed to die," Adrian said, his voice breaking slightly. "They just meant to scare him." Her mind raced, fragments of memory colliding. The anonymous phone call Daniel had brushed off. The unfamiliar car parked down their street. The night he insisted on driving alone. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked. "Because the investigation was reopened." Her head snapped up. "What?" "My brother came forward. There's enough evidence now. The firm's executives are being charged." The sun had nearly disappeared, leaving only a thin band of light on the horizon. "Daniel wasn't reckless," Adrian said quietly. "He was trying to do the right thing." Tears blurred her vision. For months, she had lived with a silent, poisonous question buried deep inside her. What if he had been careless? What if he had made a stupid mistake? What if she had missed something that could have saved him? Now that question shifted. He had been brave. "You should have told me sooner," she said, her voice shaking. "I wasn't sure it would go anywhere. I didn't want to reopen your wounds for nothing." She let out a broken laugh. They never closed. They stood in silence as the sky darkened. "Why do you look so much like him?" she asked suddenly. Adrian's mouth curved faintly. "Our mothers were sisters." The world stilled. "What?" "We found out last year," he said. "Your husband was my cousin." She felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her. Daniel had grown up in foster care. He had always believed he had no family. "He never knew," Adrian said softly. "We didn't connect the dots until I saw his photo in the news." A sob escaped her before she could stop it. Daniel had carried that loneliness his entire life, and he had never known he wasn't alone. Adrian stepped closer but kept a respectful distance. "I'm sorry." The word felt too small. They talked until the sky turned fully black. Adrian told her stories about Daniel's childhood she had never heard. About a shared grandmother who loved to bake. About summers by a lake. Lena listened, drinking in every detail as if it were oxygen. When she finally drove home, the letter folded carefully in her pocket, the house felt different. Still empty, still quiet. But something had shifted. Daniel hadn't just been the man who died on a rainy road. He had been courageous, principled, connected to a family he never knew he had. In the weeks that followed, she attended the hearings. She sat in the courtroom as evidence was presented. As powerful men who had once dismissed her as a grieving widow now avoided her gaze. She felt Daniel beside her in those moments. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as a force. When the verdict was delivered, she cried, not out of vengeance, but out of release. Afterward, Adrian found her outside the courthouse. "It's over," he said. She nodded, wiping her cheeks. "No, it's beginning." He looked at her questioningly. "For the first time since he died, I don't feel stuck in the moment of his death," she said. "I feel connected to his life." Months later, she stood once again on the pier. This time the air felt lighter. The boards no longer creaked like a warning. The water shimmered under the afternoon sun. She carried a small box. Inside were photographs Adrian had given her. Daniel as a child, grinning beside a lake. Daniel at 16, taller than the others, unaware of the camera. She smiled through tears. "I know who you were now," she whispered into the wind. The grief was still there. It would always be there, but it had changed shape. It no longer felt like a closed door. It felt like a bridge. As she watched the horizon, she realized something unexpected. Daniel's death had shattered her, but the truth had rebuilt her, and in knowing the fullness of his courage, she found her own.